Hey guys, tonight we curl beneath the weight of something ancient and cold, a shadow cast not just by death but by the silence that comes before it. You're standing where the Silk Road turns quiet. Trade has slowed, the spice scent now carries something sour, and the wind doesn't just bring camels and copper, it brings coughs. The air hums with uncertainty, but you can't name it yet. Maybe it's just the desert, maybe it's just exhaustion, or maybe it's the beginning of a silence that will scream through the next 100 years. You probably won't survive this, by the way. So, before we drift any deeper, if this hushed little corner brings you even a flicker of calm, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right in your chest. Drop your city and time below. I'll be waiting to see who's still awake at 2:41 AM in Warsaw or 12:10 AM in Nova Scotia. Now, breathe slow. Let the weight fall off your shoulders, and sync with me into tonight's slow unraveling of the past. Right here on Historian's Diary, you trudge through the dust of Kaffa, a Genoese trading post perched on the edge of the Black Sea. The year is 1346. The Mongols have laid siege to the city, but you're not worried about arrows, you're worried about the bodies. Because one by one, those bodies are being launched over the city walls. Yes, catapulted corpses. You hear the twang of a siege engine, then the wet, muffled thud as another plague-ridden corpse slams into the cobblestones. Someone screams, a dog barks, and doesn't stop. In the square, a few children run past, oblivious to the fact that the men with beards and fur hats tossing those bodies aren't just waging war, they're opening a door to something Europe isn't remotely ready for. Inside the walls, fear blooms like rot. People start coughing, bleeding, collapsing in the street. The Genoese merchants, clever folks, gather what goods they can and flee by ship, but they take something with them, nestled in the hay bales and below the wooden decks, fleas riding the backs of rats like loyal little demons. You don't know that yet. You just hear the oars. A few weeks later, you're in Constantinople. The Byzantines are exhausted, politically, financially, religiously, and now this. You overhear a physician mumble about the plague of Justinian from centuries past, but nobody wants to believe it's returned. Still, doors close earlier, markets grow quiet. The docks, those sweet, bustling veins of trade, begin to look like a chessboard with too few pieces. And then you blink, and you're in the port of Messina, Sicily. October 3047. One of the Genoese ships has just arrived. The sails droop. The sailors barely move, and as they disembark or get carried off, more like people begin to back away, not out of cruelty, but instinct. Because something isn't right. Their skin, it's turning dark. Gobos swell like angry grapes beneath the armpits, and between the legs. Some moan, some are silent. One tries to smile at a child and bleeds from his eye instead. A local priest performs blessings from a distance. The town council, wise and terrified, orders the ship away, but it's too late. The rats have already gone ashore. By the time the ship reaches Marseille, it's little more than a drifting coffin. Bodies heaped like broken marionettes, their strings cut by something invisible and merciless. From there, it's a race. The kind of race no one wants to win. You feel it ripple through Paris, through Genoa, up into the mountains of Switzerland and the lowlands of Flanders. Roads that once bustled with pilgrims now carry only monks with tear-streaked faces and doctors on trembling horses. In some towns, a third of the people vanish in weeks, in others, half. And you, poor traveller, you keep walking, because what else is there to do? You pass a nun lying in the grass. She whispers a prayer to Mary, but forgets the words halfway through. A man nearby carves a strange symbol into a tree with shaking hands. You don't ask him why. You find a small village, where no one answers the door. Bread sits untouched on a windowsill. A cat picks at something it shouldn't, and the church bell meant to toll for the dead hangs still, as if even it has given up. Word spreads faster than wagons can roll. A divine punishment, a Muslim curse, a poisoned well. Some say it came from the east, somewhere near China, but what they don't know is that China had already faced its own nightmare. Entire regions had been hit before Europe ever caught wind, bodies left buried in icy steppes, trade caravans vanishing mid-route as if swallowed by sand. In truth, The bacteria responsible, Yersinia pestis, doesn't care about kingdoms or oceans. It lives in fleas, it travels in fur, and it has all the time in the world. By now the cities begin to change. You notice strange things: bonfires of old clothing, coins boiled in vinegar, dogs and cats slaughtered by the dozen, because people think they're spreading it. Irony, of course, that it's really the rats no one suspects. A noblewoman with sapphire rings ties garlic to her bodice. A merchant refuses to touch money with bare hands. A child wears a pouch of dried rose petals around his neck, as if perfume can block the breath of death. Some people start locking their doors, others leave them wide open. You reach Avignon. The Pope sits behind a wall of flame. Literally, his advisors have circled his chamber with torches, believing fire purifies the air. He signs edicts with a trembling hand while outside. Carts roll past with yet more bodies. And still, ships keep coming. Still, the road fills with those trying to escape to outrun something that can't be seen and doesn't sleep. Along the way, you learn to stop asking names. Every person you meet might be gone tomorrow, might be gone tonight. Even the wind feels different now. Less like a breeze, more like a breath from something watching. You stop smelling rosemary and start smelling decay, and as you huddle in a half-burned inn outside Florence, listening to a stranger cough behind a thin wooden wall, you realize something. This isn't just a plague, it's a reset. The old world is crumbling, one rat at a time. You arrive at the harbour of Genoa, just as the fog begins to lift. But it's not sunlight that greets the docks. It's dread, the kind that coils low in your belly before your mind can name it. The ships have come again, and this time, they don't bring silks or saffron, they bring silence. The sails hang limp like mourning shrouds. You watch as dockhands hesitate before approaching, and for good reason. The ropes that tether these galleys to the piers are soaked not just with seawater, but with the sweat of men already dead. One sailor collapses as he steps onto land, eyes open but seeing nothing. Another stands motionless until you notice the tremor in his legs. He utters one word, peste, and falls backward into the sea. No one dives in after him. You trail behind a small group that's unloaded a few crates of goods, cloth, spices, bundles of wool, but no one is rushing to take them. No bargaining voices, no carts creaking toward the market. The onlookers are too busy noticing the dark, oozing swell on a sailor's neck, like an egg cracked beneath the skin. You can almost hear it ticking. Within hours, the city changes. Windows slam, shops bolt shut. The baker leaves his loaves, half-kneaded. The guards who once monitored trade now guard the gates, turning people away, though deep down they know it's useless. The rats have already disembarked. The plague is already home. You walk the edge of town and spot something odd, a merchant slicing fragrant lemons, placing them on his doorstep in neat little rows. He tells you, eyes wide, fingers twitching, that citrus wards off evil vapors. You nod and keep walking. He'll be gone by the week's end, and this is just one port. Marseille, Pisa, Valencia, Majorca, they all follow. Ships become the veins of death, crossing the Mediterranean like a spiderweb spun with sickness. You find yourself in Barcelona when it hits. The sun is high, the market loud, and yet there's a stillness underneath it all, a pregnant pause, until the coughing starts. You follow a woman down a narrow alleyway, drawn by her frantic muttering. She's praying, not to God, but to Saint Sebastian. His image has become strangely popular lately. A man pierced by arrows but not yet dead. Survivors like that. It feels hopeful, until she vomits blood on her rosary. By dusk, priests are out in pairs, administering last rites as quickly as they can recite them. Sometimes they barely pause between bodies. You hear a younger cleric forget the words midway through and start sobbing. An older one slaps him gently and says, "Faster, lad, they're still piling up." You'd think the rich would escape it, and they try. Oh, how they try. Their carriages race toward the countryside. They leave behind their servants, their shops, sometimes their children, but the plague doesn't respect walls or money. You later hear of a count who sealed himself in a villa with 24 staff and barrels of wine. By the time someone dared knock, only the birds answered. Up north in Paris, the doctors are experimenting. They burn herbs in giant cauldrons. They carry amber beads and wash with vinegar. They even cut open the buboes, thinking it might drain the sickness. You watch one attempt it, his hand shaking, his blade dull. The man screams once, then never again. And in every port, you hear a variation of the same rumor, that it came on a ship, that someone should have stopped them, that it's the fault of those in that town, that region, those foreigners. You cross paths with a German traveller who spits at your feet when he hears your accent. You've never even met him, but in a world where death has no face, any face will do. Now you're in Bruges. The bells don't stop ringing. You count 7 funerals before lunch. That's not unusual now. What is strange is how people keep pretending it's not happening. The taverns still pour ale. The musicians still play, at least for now. One man tells you, if we must die, better with a drink in hand, and a tune in our ears. He grins, drinks, and collapses an hour later. You rest that night in a fisherman's hut along the coast. The sea used to be a promise. Now it's a threat. You hear the waves and imagine them dragging in more ships, more death, more silence. The man who owns the hut talks about the sky, says he's seen strange colours at sunset, redder than usual, says it's a sign, a curse, maybe even the end. You lie on straw staring at the rafters. You want to believe it'll pass, that it's just a bad season, a bad wind, but deep down you know better. The ships haven't stopped, they just keep coming. And death has found its favourite ride. The city smells wrong. You've stepped into Florence expecting the warm rot of river markets, the perfume of rosewater, maybe a waft of roasted chestnuts if you're lucky. But now, the scent that clings to every breath is something different. Sweet, sickly, and it coats your tongue, seeps into your clothes, and follows you like a shadow. It's the smell of death. Not fresh, not violent, just endless. You step carefully through the narrow alleys, sidestepping what used to be puddles and are now something darker. People hurry past with scarves over their mouths. Children don't play. Vendors don't shout. And in the plaza where lovers once carved hearts into stone benches, the only carving now is done by grave diggers. The city's rhythm has changed. Time used to move with the bells. Morning mass, midday trade, evening prayers. Now, it moves with the sound of the death cart's wheels. You hear them long before you see them, squeaking, creaking, rattling along cobbled streets as men with grey hands ring their handheld bells. Bring out your dead, one calls, though his voice cracks halfway through. You can tell he's exhausted. There's a limp in his walk, a patch over one eye, and a haunted glaze over the other. You wonder if he's collecting the dead or simply waiting to join them. You follow the cart, not because you want to, but because curiosity is one of the last things still alive inside you. You trail it down via Dea Servi, past shuttered taverns and abandoned shoes. The cart stops at a house with its door cracked open. A small child appears, not more than 8, holding the wrist of a man who clearly isn't moving anymore. The cartman nods and lifts the body with a gentleness that surprises you. Your father? He asks. The girl nods. Your mother? She shakes her head. She died yesterday. You watch the man's jaw clench just once. He loads the body. The girl says nothing else. She turns and walks back inside, alone. You don't follow her. You couldn't. Instead, you step into the cathedral. It should feel safe, sacred. The kind of place where people find solace in the flicker of candles and the echo of ancient prayers. But today, even God seems afraid. You smell lavender. The priests have tried to mask the scent of the corpses lining the nave with herbs and incense. It doesn't work. The faithful kneel among the dead, whispering to saints, clutching relics, weeping softly as if volume alone might wake the divine. You kneel too. You don't pray. Not exactly, but you look up at the painted dome, at the eyes of saints frozen in time, and you wonder if they knew, if the ones who built this place knew that someday it would become a tomb instead of a sanctuary. You leave before they begin the chant. You've heard it too many times now. Always the same psalm, always the same fading cadence. It's meant to offer peace, but it only sounds like surrender. Outside, the city is splitting in two. On one side, the frantic, the ones who stockpile garlic, who wear amulets, who burn strangers at the edge of town for looking suspicious. They've taken to soaking their feet in vinegar and refusing to speak aloud. Some even draw circles of chalk around their homes, convinced that death obeys lines. On the other side, the hopeless. These are the ones who strip off their clothes, dance in the streets, drink until they forget the day. You pass a party in an old wine merchant's courtyard, half-naked men and women laughing too loudly, slurring prayers and curses alike. One sings a love song to the moon. Another vomits into a silver chalice. They look alive, almost, but the joy is brittle, the kind that shatters with a single cough. You retreat to the outskirts, to a row of small homes nestled beside a dry canal. You find lodging with a widow, who speaks little and prays often. She offers you lentils and barley. You pretend to eat. She pretends not to notice. At night, the city glows strangely. Fires burn in pits as people try to smoke out the bad air. You hear someone reciting last rites through a wall. A baby cries and doesn't stop. Somewhere nearby, a man begs God for mercy, not knowing that his wife already died the day before. You walk again in the morning. What else is there to do? Florence is emptying. The wealthy have fled. The poor have died. The rest wander like ghosts through markets with no prices, chapels with no sermons, and homes with unlocked doors. You peek inside one, just once. You wish you hadn't. The silence inside was thicker than the smell. You pass a doctor. He wears a strange mask, shaped like a bird's beak. At first you think it's a joke. Then you realize it's filled with herbs. He believes it will filter the miasma. He moves stiffly in a waxed cloak, gloves up to his elbows. He doesn't speak, just nods at you, his eye holes dark and unreadable, and moves on. He visits the home across the street. You hear screaming, then nothing. Later that day, you find a woman painting on a wall. Not art, not beauty, just tally marks. Long rows of them, hundreds, maybe thousands. She's barefoot, hair matted and humming. When you ask her what she's counting, she says, "Those I've seen fall." She doesn't stop. The church bells toll again. You've lost count of how many times. It's not just Florence anymore. Letters arrive from Siena, from Lucca, from Rome, each one more desperate than the last. Some towns beg for doctors, others beg for forgiveness. A few just stop writing altogether. You make one final visit to the Arno River. Its waters used to shimmer with life. Fishermen, ferrymen, lovers stealing kisses on the banks. Now it's just reflection. You look into it and see yourself, but thinner, older, less whole. The breeze shifts. Behind you, the death cart passes again. You don't follow this time. You know where it's going. You step out before sunrise, breath hanging in the chill, and spot two figures gliding along the street. You know them by now, the plague doctors. They move with the deliberate caution of men carrying water over ice, long black robes, heavy gloves, and those infamous beaked masks, faces that never blink, never betray. At first glance they seem like birds of ill omen, sent to peck at what remains of the living. But beneath the leather and linen, they are simply men, afraid, exhausted, outmatched. You watch as they pause at a door marked with a crude red cross. The child peers through a shutter, eyes wide as coins. The younger doctor knocks with his cane, then pushes the door open. You glimpse a brief scene, faded sheets. A hollowed woman, the kind of silence that grows between breaths when there's nothing left to say. The older doctor mutters a prayer and draws the sign of the cross over the bed. Neither linger. In the street, a dog barks. The older doctor turns his mask toward the sound, as if calculating whether a bark could carry death. Behind the masks you suspect they're holding their breath. The beak, you now know, is no ordinary mask. Inside is a jumble of herbs, rosemary, thyme, dried rose petals, cloves, all meant to ward off miasma, the bad air blamed for sickness. The doctors stuff the beak full each morning and hope the perfume does more than soothe their nerves. Vinegar-soaked robes, talismans hung around their necks, coins clutched in gloved hands. These are their only shields. Medicine is a ritual, as much as a science, and in 1348, ritual offers comfort, if not a cure. You follow them a while, keeping your distance. They visit a row of homes with painted crosses, doors bolted from the outside. They use their canes to nudge bodies, check for signs of life, test for the mark of plague. the swollen buboes, the skin turning black at the fingertips. Sometimes a groan escapes a body and the younger doctor leaps back, heart pounding. But more often, there's only stillness. The task is endless. Every street, every alley. By midday, the men have already inked dozens of names in their ledger. They argue in hushed voices about what to do with the dead, burn the bedding, seal the windows. They look for answers in each other's faces, but find only questions. You pass a garden where an old woman kneels among rosemary. She waves a sprig at you and grins with missing teeth. "Keeps death away," she says, pressing it to her nose. "And if not, at least it smells better." You take the branch she offers and tuck it into your belt. It can't hurt. In the city square, another doctor, older still, is surrounded by townsfolk clutching coins and bottles. He dispenses little packets of herbs, whispers instructions, repeats the same advice to everyone: stay away from crowds, burn sweet-smelling woods, bathe your face in vinegar. Some thank him, some scoff, some just look lost. You see the toll on all of them: doctors, healers, even the hopeful, eyes red from lack of sleep, hands raw from scrubbing. 1,000 rituals, all for the same uncertain hope. Night falls, and the doctors retreat to a makeshift hostel where they burn their clothes and pray the air is clean. You hear one of them cough, just once. The other glances at him, and they both say nothing. You realize the mask isn't just for protection, it's armor for the soul, a way to hide the fear, the helplessness, the knowledge that no mask is thick enough to keep out despair. In the city's hush, you understand. The doctors keep count of the dying, but they're also keeping count of their own courage, and every night they pray tomorrow will demand less of it. Note, the original Section 4 had 1,1912 words. Please let me know if you want the regenerated section expanded to match the length, or if you want to keep it at this tighter, more focused length. The first stone misses. It skips across the dirt, a weak toss born from panic, more than malice. But the second, heavier, aimed with shaking rage, hits its mark. The young man stumbles backward, blood streaming from his brow. He cries out in a tongue not quite Italian, maybe Hebrew, maybe Arabic. It doesn't matter. To the crowd, he is not Samuel or Isaac or Yusuf. He is other. And in the year 1348, that might as well be a death sentence. You stand on the edge of a mob, your feet rooted as if the plague itself has nailed them to the ground. It started small, just a whisper in the square. They poisoned the wells. They brought it with them. They're immune because they caused it. The whispers turn to chants. The chants turn to fists. And suddenly, Florence, a city paralyzed by an invisible enemy, finds a visible one. You've heard it before. In Marseille, in Mainz, in Basel, where the mayor himself looked away as men rounded up families and locked them inside a wooden barn. Some called it justice. Others called it prevention. But you know what they called it. Once the fire started, cleansing. Fear needs a villain. And now, the fear is drowning everything. Foreigners are chased out of towns with pitchforks. Lepers, long used to isolation, are now murdered in their sleep. Midwives, herbalists, women who know too much are accused of curses. You pass a woman tied to a cart, her hands swollen from rope burns. She weeps silently as a priest screams Latin at her from 2 feet away. She doesn't scream back. She just closes her eyes. You keep walking. In Venice, someone pins a note to a door. My neighbor sneezed 3 times. I believe she summoned the devil. The note is anonymous. The woman vanishes the next day. You stay in a hostel where people whisper in code. No one admits they're sick. No one admits they saw someone who is. It's safer to say nothing. You meet a man who hasn't hugged his wife in 6 months. He speaks to her through a curtain, eats from a separate bowl. They're both healthy for now, but barely remember each other's faces. But it's not just strangers. Fear rots the heart of families. You see it first in Siena, where a son bars the door against his own mother. He weeps as he does it, telling himself it's mercy. You watch a wife leave a cup of water outside her husband's room, then run. A grandmother asks her daughter to sit with her, just for a while. The daughter doesn't answer. At first you're horrified, then you understand. No one wants to die, but worse still, no one wants to watch someone they love die alone, so they let them die without them. The cities try to keep order. New rules are posted daily. Don't drink this water. Don't gather after dark. Burn your clothes if a neighbor coughs. Don't bury your dead too close to a church. Don't bury them too far away, either. Don't bury them at all unless you have the bishop's mark. But nothing works. Not the laws, not the prayers, not the punishments. In Cologne, a group of travelling beggars is blamed for bringing the plague. Their crime? Sleeping too near a fountain. They're whipped in the street until their skin breaks. A child claps. His father does not stop him. In Aragon, a Jewish doctor tries to help a village. He's known there, respected, even loved. But when the sickness enters the town gates, his name becomes foreign again. One night, he disappears. Some say he fled. Some say he was dragged to the woods. No one speaks his name after that. You find yourself at the edge of a burned village. The buildings are ash. The wells are sealed. A sign has been nailed to a scorched tree. It reads, "Purged." You don't go in. You don't have to. The smell tells you enough. One evening in the hills of Provence, you meet a woman tending a fire pit. Her face is hidden beneath a scarf, but her voice is calm. "They say my sister consorted with demons," she says, feeding rosemary to the flames. "She was a midwife, taught me how to cut the cord, how to stop the bleeding. People used to bring her bread." Why? You glance at the pit. Its smoke is sweet, its edges blackened from recent use. "They burned her in that," she finishes. You sit beside her in silence. She doesn't cry. You don't speak. The fire crackles between you, warm and cruel and strangely holy. When you finally ask her why she stayed, she says, "If I leave, who will remember she wasn't a monster?" The plague kills without mercy, but fear kills with choice. You realize that now, it's not just the disease sweeping across Europe. It's the suspicion, the desperation, the hunger for anyone to blame. You remember a merchant in Milan who paid soldiers to guard his street, not from the plague, but from outsiders. He died anyway. His wife survived only to be accused of cursing his food. You remember a young boy who buried his sister himself, too afraid to wait for the priests, too ashamed to let anyone see him cry. You remember a servant who whispered in your ear, "I touched a dying man last week," then asked, "Do you think that makes me guilty?" You didn't have an answer. You still don't. You leave the cities again, hoping the countryside might be gentler. But even there, the shadows linger. You pass a farmhouse where a man has painted a ring of tar around his land. He stands in the doorway with a crossbow and a sign, "We are clean. Keep out." You sleep under trees now. It feels safer than walls. At least the sky won't accuse you. One night, you hear singing in the distance. You follow the sound and find a small group dancing in a circle. They're not joyous, not drunk, just desperate. "Maybe," someone says, "if we sing loud enough it won't find us." You don't join them, but you don't walk away either, because part of you believes it too. The road stretches out before you like an open wound, flanked by nothing but brittle grasses and ruins of what once were homes. You don't see birds anymore. Not really. No cheerful chirps in the hedgerows, no chickens in the yards. Even the crows seem to have grown tired of the feast. You come across the first abandoned village at dawn. The fog still clings to the earth, softening the broken timbers and the sagging roof lines, but it can't hide the truth. No smoke rises from chimneys. The well's rope dangles, untouched. A wooden door swings open on its hinge with a slow creaking sigh, like it's still waiting for someone to return. You step inside a house with an upturned bowl still on the table. There's a wool shawl slung over the back of a chair, a child's toy on the floor. Everything is where it should be, except for the people. You check the bedroom and flinch. You'd hoped it would be empty. It's not. 2 skeletons lie beneath a blanket. You can tell from the size they were an old couple. Their hands are clasped. You leave quietly, and you don't close the door behind you. There's no one left to keep the wind out. As you travel further, the pattern repeats. Village after village. Sometimes you find evidence of hasty flight pots spilled in the garden, clothes half packed into trunks, doors barred from the inside. Other times, it's as if entire populations simply dissolved into the fog. You come upon a tavern with its shutters drawn, dust on the mugs, coins still sitting beside the till. You whisper, "Hello," once, and the echo is your only answer. In some towns, the church bells have stopped. In others, they ring without anyone to hear. One afternoon, you pass through a hamlet with a single building still intact. The chapel. Someone has painted a massive red cross on its door. Below it, in shaky Latin, "Here we are, all dead." It feels like the end of the world, but it's not, because sometimes you find life, barely. A woman standing alone in a field, planting onions without looking up. A child sitting beside a stream, too tired to cry, watching their own reflection ripple. An old man tending sheep, only 4 left, muttering names to them that sound like family. You don't ask, you just nod, and they nod back, and that's enough. You begin to understand that entire regions are turning into graveyards, not because they're marked, but because they've been forgotten. When there's no one left to remember, what's the difference between a field and a tomb? One evening, you crest a hill and look down into a valley once famous for its wheat. Now the fields are empty. But it's not the silence that makes your stomach turn. It's the mound, hundreds of them, hastily dug, shallow, covered in loose dirt and old cloth. Some are marked with sticks, others with nothing at all. A few have names etched in stone, but most are simply gone, erased. You sit at the top of the hill until the stars come out, listening to the wind scrape through the grass like the last breath of the forgotten, and still you walk. You reach a village where the ground is wet and the smell hits you before the gates. This town tried to resist. You can see that. They've built walls, blocked roads, kept outsiders out, but death doesn't always knock. Sometimes it seeps through the cracks. The market is a grave. Stalls turned over, cloth canopy shredded by weather. You see signs of a struggle, blood on a doorway, the smashed lantern, footprints that lead nowhere. And then you see the pyres, charred wood, blackened earth, bone. You find a diary near the well. The ink is faded, but you can still read it. The entries begin with hopeful prayers, plans for rationing, news from nearby towns. Then they shift, fewer words, more crossings out, then silence. The last entry reads only, "They are knocking," but no one answers anymore. You place it back on the ground. You whisper, "I see you," and that's all you can do. In some places, the trees have started growing through homes. Ivy curls around beams. Roots crack foundations. Nature wastes no time. It reclaims the dead with quiet precision. You walk through a garden where cabbages grow wild between skeletal clotheslines. Somewhere nearby, bees hum over lavender that no one planted. You wonder how long it will take before all of this town's name stories are erased completely. Will anyone remember the villages that vanished? Will the hills whisper their secrets? Or will time seal it all away, like a grave with no stone? But then, one night, you see something that stops you cold. Lanterns, dozens of them. You follow the glow, unsure if it's real or if your mind is finally slipping into hallucination. But it's real. A small encampment in the woods. Families. Survivors. They've set up tents in a clearing, arranged in careful rows. A woman stirs stew over a fire. A boy reads aloud from a book, his voice cracking, but determined. A man mends shoes by candlelight. And music. Not loud, not cheerful. Just a slow violin, playing something that feels like remembering. You're welcomed without question. They don't ask if you're clean. They already know the answer doesn't matter anymore. What matters is you've made it this far. One man tells you that he's from a town near Narbonne. Gone. Another says he's seen 12 villages disappear in as many months. A girl, barely 16, says she buried her entire family and walked west without stopping. No one doubts. They don't speak about the plague here. Not directly, but it's in every glance, every prayer, every bowl of food shared without a word. In this place, silence means solidarity, not fear. You stay for 3 nights. It's the first time in months you've heard laughter. It's weak, cracked, but it's real. You sleep beside the fire, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, and for the first time, you dream of something after. And when you leave, you do so with quiet thanks and a strange ache in your chest, because you know you'll never find them again. This plague doesn't just kill people, it kills places. It kills map, it kills the future, and all you can do is keep walking through what's left behind. You're beginning to learn how to recognize the smell of a dying home. It's not just rot or unwashed linen, or the sharp sourness of breath that hasn't tasted fresh air in days. It's something else, something you can't name, only feel. A stillness that hangs in the rafters, like time gave up halfway through. You find a house just outside of Assisi. It's quiet, too quiet. The shutters are closed, the front door open only a finger's width, like it's afraid to make a decision. You push it gently. It swings wide with a low creak. Inside, silence. There's no movement, but there's presence. You step carefully into the kitchen, bowls left half filled, the spoon resting on the floor. The fire in the hearth has long since gone out, though a single log still sits there, blackened and unburned. You move through the rooms slowly, calling out once or twice. No answer. Then upstairs, a bedroom, a mother and a child, both still. The windows open just enough to let the wind in, carrying with it a single feather, drifting like a farewell. You kneel, not out of faith but out of respect. There's a rosary in the woman's hands. Her face is peaceful. The child is curled up beside her, his fingers clutching a wooden toy, maybe a soldier, maybe a saint. You don't stay long. You've learnt not to. Some homes become tombs not by intention, but by silence, and you can't speak to them, only witness. This is what the plague does. It teaches people to close their doors, to lock them from the inside, and wait. At first, it seems cruel, then it becomes normal, then it becomes survival. You reach a town where the doors are sealed shut, not by plague but by love. People start refusing to open up even for their own families. A father locks his son out when he returns from the city. A wife places food outside the bedroom of her husband and walks away without looking back. You meet a girl who hasn't spoken aloud in 3 weeks. She mouths everything. Her mother believes sound carries the disease. You try speaking to them, but your words fall flat. They don't want conversation. They want distance. You meet a woman who lives in the cellar of her own home because her husband is sick upstairs. She brings him water, calls to him through the floorboards. He taps back with a broom handle when he's still breathing, but she hasn't heard that sound in 2 days. She tells you, if I open the door, I might die. If I stay quiet, maybe I'll live. You don't tell her what you think, that perhaps death already found her, just in another form. And yet, this fear, the fear of family, of touch, of love, is not born from coldness. It's born from agony. You meet a man who carried his wife's body into the woods and buried her himself, wrapped in their wedding quilt. She died in my arms, he says. I didn't want to let go, but I didn't want her to rot in our bed. You say nothing. What could you say? Everywhere, homes turn into prisons, families into strangers, love into guilt. You walk into a village where every window is covered with thick cloth, where people pass food through slots indoors, where funerals are done by candlelight. No mourners, no hymns, just quiet. They say this is necessary. You're starting to believe them. You think of the stories people used to tell about heroism, sacrifice, grand gestures in the face of suffering. But this isn't a world of heroes. This is a world of surviving by inches. One man you meet tells you he hasn't touched another human being in 97 days. He says it with pride, like a monk counting beads on a rosary. Then he adds, softly, I miss my son's hand on my shoulder. You don't touch him. You want to, but you've learned. You pass a convent where the nuns sing through closed gates. You can't see them. but their voices rise over the walls like ghosts. They're burying one of their own. You see the shrouded shape laid at the gate. No ceremony, just song. In a monastery further north, the monks have all sealed themselves inside. The bell still tolls every hour, but no one responds. A traveller tells you he saw one monk sitting at a high window, face pressed to the glass, mouth moving in silent prayer. He hasn't moved in days. In cities, the stories are stranger. You find buildings where multiple families have barricaded themselves in. They've created mini societies inside, taking shifts to breathe near windows, using coded knocks to communicate through walls. One family invented a pulley system to trade food between floors without making contact. Another has installed a hatch in the roof for sunlight, but keeps it covered in cloth most days, just in case the light carries sickness. One woman tells you she gave birth alone, wrapped the baby in boiled linen, and hasn't touched him with bare hands since. He's healthy, she says. I think. Her voice cracks. She smiles like someone who's forgotten how. You spend one night with a small group of travellers. All of you sleep in a barn, each in your own corner, no closer than a horse's length apart. No talking after dark, no sharing food. If someone coughs, they're moved outside without question. It's not cruel, it's agreement. And in the morning, when all 5 of you are still breathing, there's a quiet sense of victory. You never ask their names. They never ask yours. The plague has taught you that names are dangerous. Names mean memory. Memory means mourning. Yet somehow, despite the fear, people still find ways to say goodbye. You pass a house where someone has drawn hearts on the door in charcoal, 5 of them. Beside each, a name. Underneath, beloved, buried in our orchard. At another, someone has left a loaf of bread and a candle, with a note that says, for any child left alone, eat and be warm. You carry that note in your pocket for days, not because you're a child, but because you need the reminder that not everything has been lost. You come across a family burying a grandmother at dusk. No priest, no chants, just 4 people, wrapped in scarves and gloves, standing 6 paces from the grave. The youngest steps forward and places a ribbon on the soil, then turns and walks away. You ask the father why they risked gathering at all. He says, we wouldn't let her go without witnesses. And you realize, in this world where doors are closed, hearts still open, quietly, dangerously. But honestly, even if the cost is everything, you hear them before you see them. Low, urgent voices carried by the wind, a thudding rhythm like the steady fall of rain on empty streets. You follow the sound through an uneasy city, drawn by curiosity, or perhaps the simple need to know you're not the last soul left awake in this haunted place. The flagellants have arrived. They come in a column, barefoot, hair wild, skin streaked with dust and blood. At their head walks a gaunt man, clutching a wooden cross, his face twisted with both pain and rapture. Behind him, 100 others march in time, their backs already striped with fresh welts. Each swing of the lash lands with a dull snap. Some chant prayers, others sing, and a few simply cry out, begging forgiveness for sins they cannot name. No one knows quite where they come from. Germany, France, maybe Hungary. They appear in city after city, pouring through the gates as if conjured by the terror itself. At first, people are relieved. Here at last, perhaps, is a way to appease God. Here is a ritual, wild and desperate, that just might bring mercy. You watch them gather in the main square, drawing a crowd even from those who haven't dared leave their homes in days. Men and women clutch rosaries and press against the buildings, children hiding behind their skirts. The flagellants kneel, raise their arms to the sky, and begin their ritual, chanting, confessing, lashing their own backs, until blood stains the stones beneath them. Some townsfolk join in, swept up in the fever of the moment. Others watch with horror, but they watch all the same. You edge closer. The sound is mesmerizing, a relentless pulse, a chorus of voices growing and fading with each blow. For a moment, it's as if the entire city is holding its breath, waiting for a miracle or a sign. The leader's voice cuts through the noise. Repent, and the Lord may spare you. Repent, and the pestilence will pass." He stumbles, raising his hands as if to shield himself from invisible flames. But the miracle never comes. The plague does not abate. You see the faces in the crowd shift from awe to confusion to dread. An old woman murmurs, "If even this doesn't save us, what will?" By nightfall the flagellants move on, leaving behind bloodied streets and a population more divided than before. Some praise their courage, others blame them for bringing sickness from town to town, convinced the whips carry death just as surely as a ship's rat. The local priests frown and cross themselves. The bishop, if he's still alive, issues a quiet order for the flagellants to leave. But they're gone before morning, already on the road to another desperate town. In the aftermath, the city feels even more raw and unsettled. Rumours swirl faster than the wind, that the flagellants are blessed or cursed, that they've seen angels, that they've spread plague with their blood and their chanting. At a tavern, you hear a group argue over whether the end times are here, or if this is just the beginning of another cycle of pain. People latch on to meaning wherever they can find it. You see strange omens everywhere, a flock of blackbirds circling the bell tower, a lamb born with two heads, a streak of red in the twilight sky, anything that might offer a pattern, a reason, a hope. You watch as a child, her hands still stained from ashes, pretends to lead her own miniature procession through the alley, trailing scraps of ribbon behind her. Her friends follow, chanting nonsense rhymes, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Even the children feel the world's weight, and they carry in games they don't fully understand. The city's anxiety grows. Some turn to wild rituals, burning old clothes, drawing protective circles with salt, sleeping with knives under their pillows. Others retreat into silence, convinced that no prayer or punishment will help, that the only answer left is to wait, endure, and survive as best they can. You spend that night listening to the distant echoes of the flagellants' chant fading into darkness, mingled with the creak of shutters and the low, restless murmur of those too afraid to sleep. You realize that beneath all the suffering and confusion, what people crave most is a sense of control, even if it comes wrapped in pain and superstition. Europe is searching for answers in every shadow, every scar, every ritual of blood and repentance. And as you drift towards sleep, you wonder if comfort lies not in finding a reason, but in the stubborn, aching insistence on surviving anyway. Let me know if you'd like this section expanded to match your preferred length. Can add more scenes and texture on request. You step into a world that no longer follows the old rules. The certainties you once trusted, who leads, who serves, what order keeps everything upright, are dissolving before your eyes, swept away as surely as the cobblestones by the rain. It starts quietly, like all the biggest changes do. You pass through villages where the Lord's manor stands empty, ivy curling up the stone like greedy fingers. Once, the noble would ride through town on a war horse, surrounded by guards tossing coins to peasants, and decrees to the bailiff. Now the gates are rusted shut. The last you heard, the Lord's family died within a week of each other. No one replaced them. The estate is slowly being taken over by the same tenants who used to bow their heads and avert their eyes. The church feels it too. You visit a city where the bishop's seat is empty, letters piling up unread. Priests are fewer now. Many have died. Some have fled. A few are simply too exhausted to keep pretending they have answers. The great cathedral that once rang with choir voices is quiet, its marble floors scuffed and dusty. You walk its length, feeling more like a trespasser than a pilgrim. A beggar sleeps in the nave, curled up in the shadow of a saint who looks like she's weeping for the world. And the markets, how they've changed. You remember when the merchants were at the mercy of the guilds, their places fixed and their profits thin. But now, the old guild masters are gone, their sons gone, the rules that kept order swept away with them. Anyone who has something to sell, sells. Anyone who has something to trade, trades. It's a barter world again, quick and messy, but somehow alive. You witness the rise of a new kind of power, whoever is left. In the countryside, a few bold peasants seize land that no one is left to claim. You meet a woman who now manages her late lord's fields with only her daughters and a handful of survivors. There's no one to stop me, she says, a tired but wry smile on her face. There's no one left to care. You see the same story again and again. Serfs who once bent their backs in service now speak with a new confidence. If they want this land, a man tells you, let them come back and take it. There's a sense of possibility, but also of chaos. You pass through a town where the mayor is chosen by who shouts loudest in the square. In another, there's no mayor at all, just a loose council of elders who meet once a week, if anyone remembers. People create their own rules, patchwork laws stitched from whatever makes sense in the moment. You realize that those who survive are not necessarily the strong or the noble, but the adaptable, the ones willing to break old taboos, to try what would have been unthinkable a year ago. You meet a blacksmith who now bakes bread, a scholar who turns fields with a plough. We do what we must, they say. There is no one left to tell us otherwise. And suddenly, the old order, the feudal ladder, the web of debts and duties, seems not just broken, but irrelevant. It's hard to remember why anyone ever cared about it. Yet there is fear too in this new world. For every new freedom, there is an undercurrent of dread. Who protects the weak now? Who writes the laws? Who keeps the peace? You see more arguments, more fights breaking out in the marketplace. People are slow to trust. Old suspicions rise up, sharpened by hunger and loss. But for the first time, you also notice something you haven't seen in months. Ambition. You catch whispers of villagers negotiating new rents with landlords desperate for workers, servants who demand wages, not just food and shelter, craftsmen who set their own prices. In one town, the people have taken over the grain store and distribute bread as they see fit. No more waiting for permission. No more begging. You realize the world is shifting beneath your feet. The hierarchies that once seemed so permanent are turning to dust. And as you move on from town to town, you start to see the hints of something new in the faces of those who have survived. A guarded hope and a fear that what's been lost may never return. But maybe, just maybe, that isn't such a bad thing. The old world is gone, and the survivors are learning how to build a new one. From the ashes and the silence and the memories that refuse to be buried, you drift into a city you barely recognize. It could be Florence, Marseille, Cologne at this point. All the boundaries have blurred. The usual crowds are thinned and scattered, the noise subdued to a strange hush, punctuated by the rattle of a cart or the snap of a tattered banner in the wind. But there is a new sort of energy here, hidden beneath the exhaustion, one born of necessity and greed. You find yourself among strangers, faces wary but hungry, gathered around the remnants of a market. But the market isn't what it once was. Here, death has become the currency. Houses, shops, entire businesses change hands overnight, sometimes with a whispered promise, sometimes for a handful of copper, sometimes at the point of a knife. You see a boy, no older than 12, offering to sell his dead master's house to anyone bold enough to take it. He won't be coming back, the boy says, voice flat. No one in his family will. This is the new marketplace, a bazaar of the forsaken, where loss is measured in goods and land. You notice women, widows and daughters, haggling for bread with family heirlooms, silver spoons, tapestries, even wedding rings. A woman in black offers her late husband's boots to a baker in exchange for 2 weeks' worth of flour. She walks away barefoot, head high. People are buying up everything, plots of land, horses, barrels of wine, sometimes even entire streets. You watch a baker step into a goldsmith's shop, look around at the silent display cases, and quietly declare himself the new owner. No one objects. No one is left to care. You wander into what was once a stately home. Its door hangs open, swinging in the wind. The marble floor is caked in dust, footprints crisscrossing where opportunists have passed before you. In the dining hall, someone has written in chalk, "Gone south. Take what you need." The cupboards are bare, but you help yourself to a chair and sit for a while, just to remember what silence feels like in a house that once rang with voices. Outside, the graveyards have overflowed. The city council finally allowed burials in the fields, in gardens, even in the cellars of the dead. In some places, bodies are stacked, like wood, waiting for a gravedigger who will never come. The churches used to toll their bells for each soul lost, but now they only ring for the living, curfew at dusk, or a warning if a new fire breaks out. You see people dividing up what's left of a wealthy merchant's estate, furniture carried away in wheelbarrows, clothing handed down through 5 households before it fits. One man finds a stash of coins hidden in a wall and instantly declares himself a shopkeeper. His shop lasts a week, then closes when he catches the fever. There is no shame in this new market. Survival is the only law. People who once bowed their heads now argue fiercely over a barrel of apples, or a dead man's coat, or the right to sleep in the least drafty room of a house where everyone else is gone. It's as if all the old etiquette has been burned away, leaving only what's needed, and the stubborn will to carry on. Some try to restore order, to write lists of who owns what, to keep records for the future, but the future is uncertain, always on the edge of vanishing. You see a scribe with stacks of parchment, scribbling names as fast as he can, hands shaking. You wonder if anyone will ever read them, or if the lists will rot away before another generation passes. The market is chaotic, but not entirely cruel. You spot a group of neighbours dividing food among themselves, counting heads, making sure the youngest get the first bite. A girl finds a lost dog and brings it home, even though her mother says there's not enough bread for one more mouth. In another street, 2 men, strangers before this, join forces to repair a roof, trading labour for a night's shelter. Still, the trade in death casts a long shadow. You pass a field at dusk where the last belongings of a dead family have been set out in a sad row. Pots, blankets, a cracked mirror, a pile of letters tied with string. People walk by picking over the items, sometimes pausing to say a prayer, sometimes just shaking their heads and moving on. You find yourself stopping in front of the letters, tempted to take them, to keep some memory alive, but you let them be. The past is heavy enough already. As you leave the marketplace, you realize something you hadn't expected. Life goes on, stubborn and strange, in the spaces death has left behind. There's barter, laughter, even the beginnings of music and games. Children play in alleys, skipping between the puddles. A woman hums as she hangs a new curtain in an old window. And you, for all your wandering, feel for a moment almost at home among these survivors, these inheritors of a world remade by loss. You notice it first in the faces, lean, sun-darkened, but for the first time, not beaten down. There's a quiet spark in the eyes of the peasants who fill the fields. The Lord's banners still flap from crumbling towers, but you realize the world has turned upside down, and those banners are now little more than cloth in the wind. Everywhere you go, people are working the land that was once forbidden to them. A woman drives a plough through soil that belonged to her late master, calling out for her son to help. In the next field, a boy, barely old enough to hold a hoe, pockets his share of potatoes without glancing nervously toward the manor house. There's no one left to stop him. No overseer, no bailiff, no lord counting bushels at the gate. When you pass through a village in Flanders, you're greeted not by the old deference, but with new, cautious pride. The blacksmith, now the most important man in town, tells you, "Work is worth more than gold these days. If you can hold a hammer or swing a scythe, you'll never go hungry." You see it again in England. Once, the harvest was back-breaking and thankless. Now, with so many gone, those who remain are finally needed. The old man who cleans the mill sets his price and people pay it. "Used to be the Lord would give me a loaf and send me away," he says with a wry chuckle. Now, he waits his turn like everyone else. You catch whispers, "We're in demand. They need us more than we need them." It's a new song, rising everywhere. Landowners scramble to keep their fields from going fallow. They offer higher wages, more food, a cow, even freedom from old debts. Some offer daughters in marriage, some just beg. In a tavern, you overhear labourers arguing, joking, even, about who can charge the most for a day's work. "I'm worth 2 men," boasts a woman with arms as strong as any man's. 3, if you count my temper. The laughter is rough, but it's real. Of course, not all are pleased. You see a priest preaching in the square, warning of the dangers of pride and the sin of rebellion. The wealthiest landowners lobby the king for new laws to force the peasants back to the fields at the old wages. You remember hearing about the statute of labourers, rushed through by desperate nobles in England, making it illegal to ask for higher pay, but you watch, and you see people ignoring it whenever they can. The law is only as strong as the men who enforce it, and most of them are dead or too afraid to leave their houses. There are still dangers, of course. Not all landlords are gone, and not all will tolerate defiance. But the days of quiet submission are fading. You see peasants gather in secret, sometimes in the open, talking about what's fair, what's owed, what's possible now. You hear about villagers negotiating together, refusing to work unless their demands are met. In one place, you watch as a group of labourers simply walks away from a lord's fields, leaving him with nothing but promises and an empty barn. He can shout, he can threaten, but the workers know he needs them more than they need him. You spot new faces in roles once reserved for the gentry, a miller's daughter running the grist mill, a ploughman's son elected as reeve. You ask a young boy why he works for himself now, and he shrugs. There's no one left to tell me no. You realise, as you walk from town to town, that the world is starting to change from the roots up. Serfs who once toiled in silence now speak up, bargain, even walk away from bad deals. It's not right, but it's better, says one woman, kneeling in her vegetable patch. At least I get to keep what I grow. Not everything is easy. The harvest is still hard. Hunger still lurks, and every cough sends a shiver through the town. But people have discovered their own worth, and that cannot be unlearned. You wonder if the nobles understand just how much has slipped from their grasp, and whether they ever will. One day, you come across a village festival, small, cautious, but defiant. There's music, bread, even a little wine. Someone raises a toast to those who labour, and everyone drinks, even the new lord, who only last year would never have stood in a circle with his tenants. You sense he knows it's wiser now to drink with them than to stand apart. At the edge of the celebration, an old woman presses a warm loaf into your hands. We lost so much, she whispers, but we found each other. For a moment you let yourself believe that something good might grow from all this emptiness. The world, you see, is still spinning. The fields still need tending. The bread still needs baking. But now, the people who keep it spinning know their value, and for the first time, they are not afraid to ask for more. You drift toward the city again, drawn by rumours of something strange stirring in its heart. At first you think it's hope, but when you arrive it's art. Or rather, it's the attempt to make sense of everything that has happened, painted and carved and sung into every corner where people have not yet given up. You enter a church expecting silence, but you're greeted instead by the sound of brushes scratching on plaster. The air is heavy with the scent of fresh lime and crushed pigments. A painter stands atop a makeshift scaffold, dark circles under his eyes, working by the flicker of a single candle. He's painting not saints but skeletons, thin-limbed, grinning, draped in burial shrouds, twirling with the living in a ghastly dance across the chapel wall. Dance of death, he calls it. When you ask, so no one forgets. You wander through a market square where someone's left a statue, unfinished, the marble raw, but the eyes perfectly carved. They gaze upward, not in rapture but in accusation. Beneath, someone has scratched words, "We see you, death." No one moves the statue. People simply walk around it, careful not to touch. Music sounds different now. You hear a choir singing in a ruined monastery, voices low and tired, but impossibly beautiful. They don't sing for the living, they sing for the lost. You sit on a cold stone bench and let the sound wash over you. Not quite comfort, not quite grief. For the first time you realize that even in a world so wounded, people can still make something lasting. But not everyone takes comfort in creation. For many, faith itself has changed shape. You meet a priest who confesses, almost guiltily, that he's begun to doubt. How could God let this happen? He whispers, twisting a rosary in his hands. How can I tell them to hope? He shrugs. I pray for faith more than for mercy now. You see it in the faces of the people who come to light candles. Less certainty, more questions. Old prayers falter, new rituals arise. Some leave offerings not just for saints, but for nameless dead. Shoes, a cup of water, a lock of hair tied with ribbon. One old man tells you he buries pennies in the earth so the dead won't return hungry. Children's games have changed too. Instead of playing house, they play funeral, lining up dolls, singing, tossing petals, imitating the solemn voices of priests and mourners. You watch a little girl tie a black ribbon in her hair, then laugh when her friend pretends to be a skeleton, chasing her through the grass. It is heartbreaking and healing at once. You see new stories painted on every wall. Martyrs with feverish faces, angels holding baskets of herbs, devils lurking in the corners. Artists slip messages between brushstrokes, tiny bones hidden in bouquets, skulls peeking from behind cloaks, reminders that death is always watching, but so is memory. It isn't just the churches. In taverns and homes, woodcutters and weavers tell tales of the plague in song and rhyme. Some songs are grim, others mocking. Death as a trickster, death as a dance partner. You hear laughter and realize it is defiant, not carefree. Even humor has changed. Jokes are sharper, heavier, but laughter still comes. Not all is dark. There are moments of beauty, an altar clothed in spring flowers, a tapestry showing not death but rebirth. Children planting a tree where a grave once was. It's as if everyone everywhere is fighting to reclaim a piece of joy, however small. You walk through a graveyard at dusk and see candles flickering in glass jars. You listen to a woman reading poetry over her husband's grave, her voice trembling but clear. You realize with a start that these wounds are changing not just people, but the world's very soul. It's art, it's faith, it's laughter. You understand now, death takes but people answer back. With memory, with paint, with music, with stubborn hope. The Black Death may have scarred Europe, but it also taught its people how to make beauty from pain, and how to whisper, in every ruined church and painted wall, we remember, we are still here. You wander through what's left of the town, and notice the world itself feels rearranged. The streets aren't just emptier, they're stranger. Familiar places are claimed by unfamiliar people. Old class lines blur until they nearly vanish. Once you could tell a noble by their velvet and a peasant by their bare feet. Now everyone wears the same battered cloak against the cold. You stop in a square where children are playing beside a toppled statue. They don't know or care whose likeness it was. It could have been a king, a saint, or a wealthy merchant. Now, it's a climbing frame, a place to tie ribbons, a makeshift horse for little ones. You realize the world is being rebuilt on the ruins of the old one, with new hands and new dreams. Markets don't look the same. Former servants sell vegetables where their masters once set prices. Widows trade cloth beside men who used to collect taxes from their husbands. Titles don't matter much here. What matters is whether you have food, a skill to offer, or a story to trade. Even the laughter sounds different, less cautious, more shared, like everyone is in on the same secret. At the edge of the square, a group of men and women debate something over a bottle of thin wine. You recognize some faces. One was a steward, another a minor noble's daughter. They're arguing about how to share the harvest this year. They talk as equals, their voices rising and falling, with the kind of passion reserved for people who believe their words actually matter. You can't help but smile. It's strange and wonderful, and just a little bit terrifying. In a lane that used to belong to the wealthiest family in town, you watch a shoemaker hammering soles while a girl with gold rings on her fingers sweeps the doorstep. They nod at each other, not servant and mistress, but neighbors, survivors. You sense that even after the plague is gone, some of these new arrangements will endure. Yet not everyone welcomes the change. The old powers, those few who remain, cling fiercely to their traditions. A priest thunders from the pulpit about order and duty. A grey-bearded man writes letters to distant relatives, insisting that things must return to the proper way. But as you walk, you realize the proper way is simply gone. There is uncertainty, of course. No one knows what next month will bring. Some argue for new rules, some for no rules at all. You overhear a heated exchange about whether the town should keep electing its own leaders or go back to taking orders from the distant lord, if he ever returns. A woman in a patched dress says, "We kept ourselves alive. Why shouldn't we keep deciding?" Her words hang in the air, as sturdy and daring as a new-built fence. The social fabric, once tight and knotted, now feels like a quilt hastily sewn from every scrap that's left. You sense new connections, unlikely friendships. A farmer and a former monk trade seeds and stories in a way that would have been unthinkable only a year before. Grief and gratitude mingle in every handshake, every borrowed cup of flour. As evening falls, you sit by a fire with others who were strangers this morning. There is bread, there is wine, and there are stories. You hear laughter and see tears in the same hour. Someone toasts to the old world, may it rest, and another answers, to the new, may it be kinder. You drink to both. You realize that even as Europe reels from the Black Death, it is also discovering a new shape. People lean into one another, warily at first, then with growing trust. Loss has made equals of them all. At least for a while. It may not last, but it is real. And for now, as you watch the embers glow and listen to the quiet hum of voices beneath the stars, you feel it, a society rearranged, fragile, defiant, and alive. You follow the sunrise through countryside that feels changed, not just emptied, but rearranged at the root. The scars of the Black Death run deeper than lost lives or shuttered houses. The very air feels altered, thick with memory and wary hope. Sometimes, as you walk, you catch yourself searching for ghosts, not the wailing kind, but the silent reminders of who and what used to be. You find them everywhere, in the rows of unmarked graves, in the weeds climbing up abandoned cottages, in the sudden quiet that falls over a market whenever a stranger coughs. The people who remain move differently now, a little more cautious, a little less trusting, but also a little more determined. You can tell the world has changed, even if the world itself pretends not to notice. One morning, you stumble on a hillside graveyard, mounds of earth arranged in hurried rows, marked only by broken sticks or stones. A few flowers have been pressed into the soil, but most of the plots are already half swallowed by grass. You meet a young man kneeling at the edge, hands muddy, lips moving in silent prayer. He tells you, quietly, that he buries the dead because someone has to remember. He's not the only one. All across Europe, mass graves dot the landscape, reminders that the land itself is carrying wounds it will never quite forget. But the shadows left by the Black Death aren't just buried in the ground, they rise in other ways. You see it in the face of every physician who now carries not just a beaked mask but a note. The plague has forced doctors and healers to ask new questions, to notice patterns, share what they know across borders and barriers. You meet a merchant who boasts of a new Italian doctor who washes his hands before touching the sick. You hear rumors of people in distant cities boiling their water and burning their rubbish in great pits, hoping to keep death at bay. You realize the old world of folk cures, garlic necklaces, amulets, prayers whispered into rosemary, has been joined by something else, the beginning of curiosity. You spot it in the eyes of a young woman who tends the sick, jotting notes in the margins of her Bible, refusing to believe that fate is the only answer. In the churches, you see how faith has changed. Fewer people crowd the altars, some pray louder, desperate for certainty, while others keep their distance, quiet and searching. You overhear a priest admit he no longer knows what God wants, only that suffering has made the people stubborn and strange, quick to ask questions and slow to accept old answers. But perhaps the most lasting wound is this, the way people see each other. You notice that suspicion has outlasted the fever. There are new taboos: don't share cups, don't sit too close, don't trust too easily. Children are taught not to touch, not to linger in crowds, to wash more than pray. Some say the world feels colder, others say it's simply more careful. Yet, even now, there is movement. Peasants push for rights, craftsmen seek new guilds, midwives and healers share their knowledge quietly, out of sight of priests who still distrust anything new. The language of Europe is slowly filling with new words for illness, for quarantine, for survival. You hear contagion and immunity whispered like magic spells. You see the beginnings of a world that will remember. You walk beneath trees that have seen whole families vanish, and yet you see new children playing quieter perhaps, but laughing still. In the marketplace, the first masks linger, not for fashion but for peace of mind. You see the first hesitant festivals, the return of music, the awkward attempts at joy. You realize that though the shadow is long, it's not endless. Europe will carry the Black Death in its bones forever, quietly, terribly, but with the memory of how it survived. And you, moving through these fields and towns, feel the hush of something almost like hope. You're walking the edges of the present now, the world at your heels, both familiar and not. In every corner of Europe, the Black Death's shadow lingers, Less visible, perhaps, but never fully gone. Life resumes, yes, but always with an echo, a glance over the shoulder, a prayer mumbled in the morning, a door left open just a crack to let out the bad air. You sit one morning in a city square where pigeons have reclaimed the statues and merchants hawk their wares behind makeshift screens. Here, you notice how people pause before shaking hands, how children play but never stray too far from their mother's eyes. Even laughter sounds different, softened at the edges, shaped by all it has outlasted. The world is not what it was, but it is not broken either. Everywhere you go, you see hints of what's to come. Small details that together tell the story of a society changed forever. In a hospital ward, a nurse soaks her apron in vinegar before tending to a coughing boy, then scrubs her hands with harsh soap, repeating a ritual she learned from someone who lived through the worst of the plague. In a church, candles burn for the lost, but beside them sit baskets of dried herbs and handwritten instructions. Boil your water, burn your bedding, trust clean air. You watch a priest bless the congregation, then quietly slip outside to check on a neighbour with a fever. You overhear new words in taverns and marketplaces: quarantine, isolation, contagion. These aren't just medical terms anymore. They're part of daily life, woven into the way people greet each other, the way they arrange tables, the way they mourn and celebrate. You see the beginnings of new laws, new ways of keeping records. There are lists of the dead, but also of the living. Who has survived, who has skills, who is able to work and rebuild. You realize that something has shifted deep beneath the surface. The trauma and lessons of the Black Death are now etched into custom and memory, carried in the nervous hands that light candles and in the cautious eyes that scan the horizon. Children born after the plague grow up with stories of the pestilence, of the time when death moved through the land like fog. They wear small amulets, not for luck, but as reminders to be vigilant, to care for one another, to never take tomorrow for granted. And even as the years pass and cities grow busier again, the legacy lingers. You hear of a doctor in Avignon, teaching students to examine wounds and wash their hands. You hear rumours that somewhere far away, a city is experimenting with locking its gates to outsiders for 40 days. A quarantine, they call it. People scoff, some rebel, but many more comply, remembering what it cost to ignore the lesson once. You see how Europe's wounds, though slow to heal, have changed the way people dream. Artists paint not just saints and kings, but scenes of healing, survival, ordinary families sharing a meal together. Songs tell stories of loss and resilience, of the years the world stopped and started again. And you, who have walked through all this change, feel it in your bones too. The world you knew is gone, but something new is being built in its place. A society that understands fragility, that has felt the chill of the unknown, and that clings fiercely to the warmth of another human voice. Maybe, just maybe, you realize the Black Death did not simply end an age. It whispered forward a reminder, a warning, a call to care for each other, even in the darkest hours. And tonight, as you sit beside the low hum of a city that refuses to be silenced, you hear those whispers moving on the wind, curling into the dreams of the generations to come. Let yourself grow soft with the slow hush of night. The world outside your window may feel bigger than it did before this journey, full of old shadows, yes, but also the quiet strength of those who kept going, step by step through every loss and change. The people you met tonight, the mothers, the wanderers, the children in empty squares, showed you that even in the darkest times, humanity finds a way to hold on. Sometimes it's through a loaf of bread shared around a fire, or a laugh exchanged in a broken-down market, or the stubborn work of planting seeds in ground left raw by sorrow. As you drift, imagine the fields greening again, slow and certain, covering over scars without forgetting them. Imagine the small sounds of life, birds returning to rooftops, soft chatter spilling from doorways, a lullaby rising in the dusk. These are the true answers history gives. That pain passes, that memory stays, and that every ending is stitched with the thread of a new beginning. Breathe a little deeper. Let your shoulders loosen, the world's weight softening, slipping down and away. Remember, you walk in the footsteps of survivors. Their strength is in you, their dreams curling quiet through the centuries until they reach your pillow tonight. If your heart feels heavy, let it be cradled by the gentle hush of sleep. Let the ghosts of the past fade to silence, leaving only the warmth of your own breath and the certainty that, even after the darkest night, dawn always returns. Good night, traveller. Let the old world rest, and let yourself dream easy. Sweet dreams.